Okay, so we've talked about characters. Let's talk about themes in this story, right? Because it's a word you probably think about a lot when you're thinking about literature. There's got to be some theme or some moral. And actually, in this story, sorry for all the fidgeting, I'm trying to get situated here. In the story, there's a passage where they talk about morals, right? On page 646, Mitchell Sanders says, "There's a moral here. They were waiting for Lavender's chopper, smoking the dead man's dope. The moral's pretty obvious," Sanders said, and winked. "Stay away from drugs. No joke, they'll ruin your day every time." So, Lavender gets shot while he's peeing, and the theme, obviously, like in an after school special, is don't do drugs. Do you believe that? Do you think that's actually the theme or the moral of the story? I don't. I really don't believe that. I think that it's far more complicated. If there is a theme here, it's not easily distillable like that. So that's one thing that I think it's important to learn. Is if this is maybe your first venture into literature in a serious way. We grew up hearing fairy tales, and they have themes or they have morals, and these morals teach lessons, right? But in literature, I don't think you're going to run into stories that often, stories or poems or whatever, that have easily distillable themes or values that you can pull out of them, right? Tim O'Brien, later in the book called The Things They Carried, it's the title of the short story and also of the book in which the short story is contained. He has a story called How to Tell a True War Story. And in that story, he says you have to be skeptical of any war story that has a moral. And I think that's true, and I think actually you have to be skeptical of any story that presumes to have a clear moral. So it's one thing I like about this story is that the morals aren't quite clear. That's why, again, why I like this Martha character so much, because she's so complicated and she contradicts herself, right? So everything is not cut and dry. Love is not cut and dry. Does she love him? Does she not? I think she's got some affection for him, but it's obviously complicated. It's not real love, so it's kind of messy, right? So as you go forward through this story, through other stories like Cathedral this week, and as we move through the semester, think about themes and question, is there a moral here? Is the moral obvious, or is it really subtle? I think in this story it's more about, like, people do what they've got to do to survive, right? I think, these moments where they make jokes about Ted Lavender's death, I think those are really telling, right? Because, if you or I were to do that in the world we live in now, right? In Iowa, not at war, people would think we're really callous. But I don't think we can bring that same expectation to these guys who are in war, right? Because they have, they can't have those emotional ties. They have to do whatever they can do to survive. And part of, why do they carry all these things? It's not because it's fun. They carry these things, even though they're heavy, because they have to. That's what they have to do to survive. So there's this sort of physical survival, and that's why they carry all of these literal things. And then there's the figurative survival, which is why they wear the pantyhose, or they carry the photographs and the letters and the pebbles. There's the emotional survival, right? And so why, when Ted Lavender dies, they sort of have to separate themselves from that death, and being able to make jokes about it makes it easier for them. Remember when they go into the tunnels, they make jokes about who's going to go into the tunnel, who doesn't. When the guy comes out, they're making the spooky ghost noises, right? Which is when Lavender gets shot. So there's all these, these sort of, I'm not a psychologist, but, they're trying to dissociate themselves from these crises, right? And they're trying to they do that in order to survive. They have to do things to survive physically. They have to fight the war. They have to carry all of these supplies. But then emotionally, they have to survive too. And I think that's one of the themes of the story.